Well, we've been talking about trauma, and there is simple trauma and complex trauma. Now, in my book, there really is nothing known as simple trauma. Trauma, regardless of one incident or many incidents, is very challenging and traumatic. But a complex trauma or even a trauma experience, according to Dr. Richard Schwartz in the Internal Family Systems, which I really like how he describes this. He says that when a person goes through some major trauma, the the body, the self begins to protect itself. And this is how it protects itself. It divides itself into parts. And so there is a part of you when you have experienced trauma that causes you to go into hibernation, goes into hiding. You go to sleep. A part of you goes to sleep. And that's the emotional part of you. Because whatever it is that that trauma was, the pain of dealing with it, the emotional strain was so heavy that it caused that part of you to go in exile. Now, there is then what he calls the manager. It is the manager's job to make sure that that emotion does not get out of prison. It does not come out of hibernation. And that manager is going to do whatever it needs to do to keep you in exile. So it makes sense that a person can have a traumatic experience at 15 and they do not mature emotionally past that age 15, even at age 40, because that emotional part is still stuck in exile at age 15. So that manager is able to control you by saying, you're stupid, you're dumb, you know you can't do that. And so it keeps you in exile. It almost creates an atmosphere of fear. The other aspect of the self is the fireman. Now, the fireman, when it sees the exile coming out of hibernation, will begin to put a fire hose on you, keeping you in exile, warding you down so you cannot get out by creating alternatives for you to deal with your emotions. And that instead of dealing with the emotions, you or I tend to get into food addictions, sex addictions, alcohol, or drug addictions that keeps us from having to deal with that emotional pain. And I thought that was a really good understanding of how we deal with the trauma because it keeps us. The manager tries to oversee us and make sure we stay in exile. The fireman tries to make sure that we stay in exile. But we must uncover the self and we must begin to deal with the trauma. The way out of it is to face the trauma, to face the emotion of the trauma, to find out what was that painful thing that I was missing. Maybe it was a connection, maybe it was feeling insignificant, maybe it was feeling unworthy, and being able to address those things so that we can get out of exile. Because on some level,